What's up, Psychedelic Investors? My name's James, and you're watching The Psychedelic Investor, your number one news source for psychedelic stocks and everything MindMed. Today, we're going to be discussing the newly formed Psychedelic Medicines ETF, PSYK, or PSYK, which is currently traded on the NEO exchange in Canada. So I've actually been going back and forth about whether or not I believe that investing in this ETF, as opposed to just investing in the top individual stocks in the field, is a good idea, and whether I personally want to invest in it. And part of the reason that this video took so long is because of this. Before I give you guys my opinion on PSYK, I wanted to have taken the time to understand why, who, and what this ETF is. Everything carries with it an opportunity cost, and if you put your money into this ETF, you'll have less money to put elsewhere. So you want to make sure that you get the biggest bang for your buck. And while there are many things that I like when it comes to PSYK, there are also some things I dislike. So in this video, we're going to ruminate on just that. First, we'll discuss the why, what, who, when, and where of this ETF, and next, once we have a solid understanding of the fundamentals, we'll discuss whether this is something worth putting your money into. But first, if you enjoy this video and want to see more content like it, invest in the channel with your like and subscribe. Over time, you'll see your investment grow as we continue to bring you quality content. Oh, and as fans of the channel can see, perhaps unsurprisingly, when I left it up to the internet whether or not I should shave the beard side won, overwhelmingly. So, you can color me whelmed. Enjoy the video. The first thing that we have to talk about is the why. Why does this ETF exist? What benefits will it bring to individual investors and the sector as a whole? And before we get into my thoughts and opinions on this, we are first going to briefly listen to the CEO and president of Horizons ETF, the company that runs PSYK ETF, Steve Hawkins, on his explanation of the why.
Thematic ETFs have really taken off in the last year. There's now more than 40 in Canada, offering exposures to various themes with over $3 billion in AUM. You know, we really believe ETFs empower investors. They provide a liquid, diversified way for investors to enter new sectors like this one. There's a symbiotic impact for investors with an ETF like PSYK. It provides an efficient way for investors to get access to the sector, but it also provides key capital for these companies to grow. And we're very, very excited about what we can do there to help out in the psychedelics industry. There's a really do-good aspect to PSYK. The World Health Organization said there's more than 700 million people globally that are suffering from some form of mental illness, and 250 million, specifically suffering from depression. There hasn't been a lot of development in treatments for these mental illnesses and depression over the last decade, but with the introduction of psychedelics, this is one area where we see some real progress in treatments is going to happen. There's the therapeutic potential for these drugs. There's real science and credibility behind them. Global antidepressant market is about 15 billion US, and the introduction of psychedelics into this has the potential to be a key tool in this marketplace. Canada has really become a key proving ground for the emerging sectors and asset classes such as cannabis, blockchain, and now psychedelics. And this is an area where Horizons ETFs, as an innovator, is very happy to be partnering with NEO to take a real leadership position globally.
So, in Steve Hawkins' words, the purpose of PSYK is to allow new investors to enter the psychedelic medicines field by taking a chunk of the entire sector, rather than picking and choosing specific companies. He said that it also, crucially, allows these companies to get more access to capital. And a quick reminder, this sector is at a very early stage, and all of these companies, large cap and small cap alike, will need to attract more funding to complete their clinical trials and bring their products to market. So anything that can attract more capital to the field is essential. He continues with how there is a do-good aspect to the existence of PSYK. There are more than 700 million people suffering from mental health disorders that can potentially be helped with psychedelic medicines. And if this ETF can bring more funding and exposure to these projects, well, then it will have a positive impact on the world. And then, of course, he mentions how much money there is to be made. He discusses how the antidepressants market is worth 50 billion USD, which is, of course, just one of the many markets psychedelic medicines can tap. So, Mr. Hawkins here gives a great rundown on why PSYK exists, or what the purpose of it is. An investor in the PSYK ETF doesn't necessarily need to understand the subtle differences between all of these companies, they can let a professional do it, meaning they can set it and forget it. It will also bring more funding to the industry as a whole, which will both help individual companies and the wider mission of treating mental health disorders, which wreaks havoc on hundreds of millions of people without an end in sight. And of course, ultimately, its purpose is to make money for those who invest in it. Now, so far, I love this. When investing, the first question I ask myself is why? Why does this company exist? What purpose does it serve, and what problem is it trying to solve? If the answer is just to make money, then there are other companies I can invest in. If a company's goal is solely money, then chances are they're not going to make it. They need to be solving a problem in people's lives, making their existence better, for the company to truly rake in the dough long term. It's kind of like in the first Harry Potter, where only people who do not desire to use the Philosopher's Stone can attain it through the Mirror of the Erased. So, now that we've asked the why, we next need to ask who. You can have the best motivations in the world, but if your plans are not executed by a trustworthy team, then it means diddly squat. And here, we're going to keep it brief. As already mentioned, the PSYK ETF is run by Horizons ETFs, who has as its president and CEO, Steve Hawkins. Horizons has dozens of other ETFs in many sectors, some actively managed, some passively managed. So here, it is just important that it is run by a competent and experienced team, which it appears to be. Since this is an ETF and not a company building things itself, and especially since it's passively managed, more on that later, we don't need to go too into detail about who the decision makers are, we just need to be confident that it is run by professionals, which it is. Next, we have the when and the where. So this ETF started trading on January 27th on the Canadian NEO market with plans to eventually be listed in the United States. Though we don't have that date yet, if Horizon does manage to get the Psychedelic Medicines ETF listed in the US, this will be a big boost for the entire sector. It will attract lots of capital to companies like MindMed, Numinus, Medicine, and even more media coverage. So again, we don't yet know when this will happen, but the day it is open to the American market will be a day to circle on your calendar. And finally, we have the what. What is the structure of this ETF, and what are the companies included within it? So first of all, PSYK is tracking an index called the North American Psychedelics Index, which is owned by Horizons. Basically, Horizons puts the funds they have under management into this index, and then they tie the stock price of the ETF to the index. Since it's passively managed, based on market cap, Horizons is not actively increasing or decreasing positions in individual companies based on their opinions of how advanced a company is or how well they are executing. All that matters for the position of a stock in the ETF is its market cap, with a few limits. The company involved in psychedelic medicines with the highest market cap will have the highest position. The company with the second highest market cap will have the second highest position in the ETF, and so on. And here it's important to note the ETF does not get reorganized daily or monthly, but rather quarterly. So a company that starts a quarter with a low market cap and then explodes in value will not be given a heavier weighting in the ETF until the quarterly reorganization, though Horizon does include stipulations to allow extraordinary reorganizations at any time. Also important to note is that no one company can exceed 10% of the ETF's value. So, for example, both MindMed and Compass Pathways are much larger than the rest of the companies included in the index. If the index was solely based on market cap, these two companies would probably eat up much more than 50% of it. Therefore, if any company's market cap would warrant them a greater distribution than 10%, then everything above that 10% is redistributed to the companies below it. One last thing to note is that a company that is involved in psychedelic medicines but has its main business elsewhere, like Johnson & Johnson, are limited to a 5% weighting in this ETF. So now that we understand how the ETF works, let's look at the companies held within it. There are 17 of them, though we will briefly just go through the top 10. In the top 3 places currently, we have Numinus, MindMed, and Compass. Numinus is a Canadian company treating depression with ketamine, as well as growing psilocybin and starting compassionate access trials using psilocybin and MDMA. MindMed, my favorite company in the space, has oodles of clinical trials, including treating addiction with 18-MC and treating suicide headaches, ADHD, and anxiety with LSD. And finally, we have Compass Pathways, and Compass is a company backed by Peter Thiel, which has a phase 2b trial treating depression with psilocybin. And a few of you may be a little confused right now. If the ETF ranks its stocks in accordance to market cap, Why is Numinus ahead of MindMed and Compass, which each are more than 700% larger than Numinus? The answer lies in the fact that MindMed started at the maximum of 10%, as did Compass. After the remainder of their shares got redistributed to the rest of the companies, the third largest, NUMI, got pushed up to 10% as well. So on January 27th, all three companies started at a 10% weighting, and since then, MindMed and Compass stocks have fallen by more than Numinus's has, so at the moment, NUMI is weighted higher than MindMed and Compass. This is only temporary, however. If the situation remains stable until the next reordering in about 3 months, MindMed will be once again bumped back up to 10%. Rounding out the top 10 are a bunch of names you may be familiar with. Celios Therapeutics is a company looking to treat a variety of central nervous system diseases with various compounds like ketamine. Cybin is also looking to treat nervous system diseases with a focus on depression using a variety of psychedelic compounds. Greenbrook is a little bit different. Their main experimental treatment is using transcranial magnetic stimulation, or TMS, to treat depression. In other words, they're using electromagnetic stimulation on specific regions of the brain. The company is looking at pairing this with ketamine therapy before and after TMS. And this seems way out there, and I will definitely have to do more research into Greenbrook in the future. It seems very exciting, but to be honest with you guys, I really don't have any idea how effective electromagnetic stimulation will be, so it'll be something we have to keep an eye on going forward. Continuing, Field Trip is another exciting company using S-ketamine-enhanced psychotherapy. Red Light Holland grows and sells psilocybin truffles for both medical and recreational use in the Netherlands. Revive focuses mostly on CBD, but with its recent acquisition of psilocybin Pharmacore, they're beginning to test psilocybin. And finally, we have Johnson & Johnson, a mega healthcare conglomerate which is dabbling in ketamine nasal sprays. We don't have time to dive into each of these companies in this video, but hopefully we will eventually be able to get a video on most of them. One thing I will say, however, is that it is hard to judge how far advanced or how promising a lot of these smaller companies are from the outside. They all sound great on paper, but the reality is that most probably won't survive long term. They will need hundreds of millions of dollars in funding, which is more than most of their market caps. So, now that we've discussed everything you need to know when it comes to the PSYK ETF, let's now talk about if it is a good investment. And here, again, I am of two minds. I think, personally, I'm going to stick to investing in the big three: MindMed, Compass, and once it IPOs, Atai Life Sciences. The rest, at this moment, though this may change, do not have the capital needed to do the years' worth of research and clinical trials and then scale production. I believe that most, if not all, of the small companies in the field will end up either going under for lack of funding or be absorbed by larger companies. So, as it stands, about 75% of this ETF is smaller companies, of which I am skeptical. Now, that is not to say that all of these companies are bad. It is possible that 2 or even 3 or 4 may be successful. And if that is the case, the gains that these companies would make would more than offset the losses incurred from the others failing. So my suggestion would be, and of course this is not financial advice, always do your own due diligence. If you are planning on investing in smaller companies in this field and are not limiting yourself to the big three, then it may be wise to spread out the risk among the many smaller companies. Personally though, once I'm ready to put more money into this field, it will just be into MindMed and Atai, once it IPOs directly. Now, I'm not saying that PSYK is not exciting. In fact, the very opposite is true, and I will be keeping a close eye on it, and will be leaving the door wide open to investing in it in the future. Right now, there are just too many other vehicles I'm putting my money into, but in the future, I could see myself adding PSYK to my portfolio. Before we end the video, I just want to talk about how much of an effect PSYK will have on the stock prices of companies in the field, specifically MindMed. Right now, PSYK has about $18 million under management, so it is a very small ETF. That would mean that they have about $1.8 million in MindMed, or about 0.1% of the company's shares. So obviously, this has a positive effect, but is very small at the moment. Now, if this ETF attracts 100 times the capital it currently has, especially if it opens up to the United States, it will have a much larger effect on the stock price. But for now, it's limited. If anything, the media coverage it's bringing to companies like MindMed is having a bigger effect on the stock price than the ETF itself. If you've made it this far in the video, smash that like button to support the channel, and comment whether you agree or not with my opinion that investing in PSYK at the moment may not be the best move. And of course, subscribe so you never miss an update. And if you're just not ready to say goodbye yet, click on one of the videos you see on your screen. They're straight bangers. This is James from the Psychedelic Investor, signing out. I'll see you next time.